My name is Mud. The nickname was given to me during your days of touring. I volunteered for Stephen to take notes on a conversation with, which he calls, the professor. So, for people listening who don't live in the bond market every day, how do all these debt and deficit issues actually hit them in their wallets? The professor gets into the current bond market analysis. The simplest way to put it is, big, growing US debt and rising bond yields eventually mean higher borrowing costs for regular people, on mortgages, car loans, and credit cards. Stephen asks about housing and affordability of owning and maintaining a home. Let's start with housing. Everybody feels that. The professor replies. Right. Back to basics. Think of the 10-year treasury as a kind of anchor for 30-year mortgage rates. When investors get nervous about how much the US is borrowing and whether we're serious about ever stabilizing debt, they demand higher yields to lend money to the government. Stephen asks. And when that safe rate goes up, then mortgage rates go up too. That means higher monthly payments for new buyers, tougher qualification standards. Existing homeowners find refinancing much less attractive or impossible. So the conversation we're having about trillions of dollars of debt shows up as, I can't afford the house I could have afforded 2 years ago. What next? Car loans and personal loans. Stephen then asks, okay, so it's not just the 30-year mortgage. How about car loans and personal loans? Professor replies. Banks and lenders look at what they can earn on risk-free stuff like treasury bonds. If the government has to pay more to borrow, that becomes the floor, and everyone else ends up paying more too. So car loans, personal loans, any kind of installment credit. Rates drift higher. Monthly payments on the same car or same loan size get more expensive. Next are credit cards and everyday debt. Already irritated, Stephen asks. People are already getting crushed by credit card interest. Where does that fit into the picture? Credit card rates are more tied to short-term interest rates, but the big story is similar. If markets are stressed about debt, deficits, and policy uncertainty, it's harder to bring overall rates down in a stable way. The result is, very high APRs stay high. In some cases, they creep even higher. Carrying a balance gets more and more expensive over time. So that bond market fog of uncertainty you and I talked about? It becomes the fog on your monthly credit card statement. What about the job situation? Jobs, wages, and cost of living. Already annoyed, Stephen asks. People might say, fine, rates are high, but at least the economy isn't in a deep recession. What's the connection there? Higher rates because of debt concerns can slowly cool investment and hiring. Businesses delay projects because borrowing costs more. That can mean slower job growth, pressure on wages. At the same time, you've still got higher borrowing costs on loans and cards. High prices for essentials, especially when geopolitics messes with energy and supply chains. So households feel squeezed from both sides, income on one side, debt and prices on the other. I see Stephen losing his patience and asking, what's more? Band-aid policies and volatility. In the meeting, we used that leaking ship metaphor, plug this hole, then that one. How does that play out for normal people? The professor replies calmly. When Treasury or other authorities use short-term fixes, for example, tweaking bond programs to push down long-term rates temporarily, doing small FX interventions, like euro-yen swaps, that don't solve the root problem, you often get more volatility. Mortgage quotes moving around quickly, lenders tightening or changing offers on short notice, currencies swinging, which feeds into prices for imported goods and energy. So instead of a stable environment where you can plan, people get whiplash. The rate I was quoted last week is gone. The car loan deal changed. My costs are moving faster than my paycheck. Professor, you were aware I was going to take these questions as long as I have your time. Talk about trust, geopolitics, and your wallet. What's your take, Professor? You also connected this to things like tariffs and wars. Spell that out. The professor replies. When the US looks unpredictable, on trade, on foreign policy, on how it uses economic tools, global investors start to trust us less. If you're lending to a country you trust less, you demand a higher interest rate. Those higher rates don't just apply to Washington. They trickle down into mortgage rates, car loans, small business borrowing, credit lines. So foreign policy and bond auctions sound abstract, but they literally show up as: how much do I pay every month for a roof over my head, a car to get to work, or the balance on my card? So to sum it up, the big message from this conversation is: huge, growing debt plus ad hoc, short-term interventions don't just live in some Wall Street spreadsheet. They show up as higher mortgage rates, more expensive car and personal loans, stubbornly high credit card interest, and a general sense that everything financial is less stable and more expensive. Hey, Stephen, exactly. Your question is on point. The bond market is basically the messenger. And right now, the message is: if you don't get the debt and deficit under control, borrowing will stay painful for everyone. Mud here to finalize this meeting. Stephen just left the studio enraged. So I will sign off for him. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I promise I will supervise him. This note is between the listeners and me. I met him in the music business. I did not know he was well versed in finance. I cannot disclose the professor due to keeping his identity private. For now. Thank you very much for listening. The information is basic finance. However, Stephen feels to disseminate from the core of learning the financial system.